judge them. I judge them. I listen to what they say. I observe what they do. And one thing I do is I try to sync those two things up. Is what you're saying matching what you're doing? Are you someone that actually lives the things you claim to believe in? Do you spend time criticizing others and never critique yourself? Do you do the same things you criticize other people for? Like all those different things are how you judge whether someone is a good person or not. I think, a lot of times it's like, are they nice to me? Like, well, I used to be, I used to be afraid of so-and-so, but they're really nice to me. So I guess they're a good person. Someone being nice to you doesn't make them a good person. For many years, I was a musician and I traveled. Well, I'm still a musician, but I mean, profession, that was my profession. And I traveled around playing. And there was one place that I played in, one of the bands that I was in. There was a guy there that just loved me for some reason. And I'm a drummer, and I would let him play my drums. He'd come up and do this one song every time he was there. And he was just like my best buddy, or that's how he treated me and that's how he acted. I was waving and being really nice and friendly and all those things. And later I heard, he was arrested for killing somebody, and he barricaded. It was some weird story. I can't remember it exactly, but somehow he was finally arrested for barricading himself in a house after he'd killed somebody, and having a standoff with the police. All this different stuff. I mean, he was actually a really rotten person. I guess he was. Not that drug dealers are necessarily rotten, but he was like, he would steal drugs. He worked as a police officer, undercover police officer, and he would steal drugs and sell them and put other people in jail for them, steal them from the people he was arresting, and then sell the drugs himself. I mean, he was just an all-around loathsome human being in real life, beating women and, other people and all that sort of thing. But he really liked me. And he was really nice to me. So, I mean, if I were just so self-centered that I assumed that anybody that liked me must be a good person, I'd be a lot like Trump. Anyway, I'm happy to say that I haven't had much to say about Trump lately, and I'm not going to start talking about him that much now. But what I'm getting at is that being a good person means more than just being nice or friendly, or, hard worker, or all these different things that people point to as signs of a good person. A good person is someone that means what they say, means good things, means well for others. Not just me, not just nice to me, but nice to even people I don't like. Nice to everybody. Nice in the sense that they're good, they're kind, they're sensitive, they care about others. That's a sign of a good person. And that's the sign of a good nation too. And if you feel your nation is not doing that, not living up to those ideals, then you should do something about it. You should say something about it. And that's what I do on this show. I talk about what I think is wrong with at least one aspect of this nation's activity or actions. It does not live up to its words when it comes to immigrants. We don't treat them the way we say we treat them. We don't behave the way we say we are supposed to behave, the way we say others are supposed to behave. That means something. And as someone who wants this country to be a good place, a great place, I have to fight for that. I have to try to make it a good place. I have to try to change what's wrong with it. Loving the country is not hugging a flag and saying, America first. That's not loving it at all. That's just being selfish and self-centered and wrapping yourself in surface things that make you look a certain way because it looks good. It plays well. It takes a good picture. Anyway, I'm going on and on. I'm going to switch gears here. Here's a story from the New York Times entitled Democrats' Plan to Overhaul Legal Immigration Focuses on Green Card Backlog. We've talked about this a bunch of times, so let's see what they have to say. As Democrats scramble to ensure that protections for millions of undocumented immigrants are included in a sprawling social safety net package, Dr. Pranav Singh is focused on a lesser-known plan to address the green card backlog that pushed him to leave his family and job in Iowa. After nearly a decade of treating patients with respiratory problems, Dr. Singh could no longer bear the uncertainty of living in the United States on a visa that could be revoked if there were a change in his employment. I've got 15 years in the U.S. and I'm still considered a visa holder or alien, said Dr. Singh, who returned to India last summer after years of bureaucratic languishing. How long can you stand that level of abuse? When President Biden unveiled an outline of the latest version of the Social Policy and Climate Bill on Thursday, it included an immigration provision that could help Dr. Singh and millions of other families and foreign workers, but only if it can make its way past the Senate parliamentarian, who enforces strict rules about what can be included in the package. The proposal would free up hundreds of thousands of green cards that various administrations failed to use over several decades, making them available for immigrants who are currently caught up in the backlog. The United States imposes caps by country on the number of green cards issued each year, which means that applicants from countries like India, where many people apply to work in the United States, end up waiting for years. Under the new provision, those unused green cards would be recaptured and made available to applicants. Foreigners who have been stuck on waiting lists would also be able to pay higher fees to move up in line for legal status. The proposal comes at a time when Democrats are growing increasingly desperate to make good on the president's pledge to overhaul the immigration system, particularly while the party also holds both chambers of Congress. Many Democrats and advocates believe it is the best chance to make progress on the issue in the budget bill, but the plan faces an uncertain path ahead. Elizabeth McDonough, the Senate parliamentarian, has repeatedly shot down efforts to include immigration measures in Mr. Biden's social safety net package, which is moving through Congress under a special process known as reconciliation that shields it from a filibuster. Only relatively narrow provisions that directly impact government revenues can be included in such bills, and the parliamentarian previously ruled that two other immigration plans did not pass that test. Democrats argue that the new proposal should satisfy the parliamentarian because it involves reclaiming visas already approved by Congress, a modest tweak of the law, they say, rather than a sweeping proposal such as raising the ceiling for green cards or granting legal status to a new population of immigrants. Still, skepticism abounds in the halls of Congress. Some Democrats, including Representative Richie Torres of New York, have begun calling on their Senate colleagues to overrule the parliamentarian, saying they don't believe she will embrace any immigration proposals. In addition to the visa recapture provision, Mr. Biden's $100 billion plan to overhaul the immigration system includes a proposal to provide protection from deportation for millions of undocumented immigrants who are longtime residents of the country, and $2.8 billion for U.S. citizenship and immigration services to more efficiently process migrants. Some Democrats have been hesitant to single out the legal immigration proposal after the more ambitious plans to provide relief to undocumented immigrants were rejected by the parliamentarian. The negotiations over the spending package have already forced the administration to make grueling cuts to investments in community college, paid leave, and proposals to address climate change. The tension over how much to compromise has stretched over to immigration policies, an area in which supporters are growing increasingly impatient for drastic changes. I am certainly supportive of clearing the visa backlog, said Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, who last month expressed concern about supporting an immigration proposal for businesses without providing a pathway to citizenship. But the latest proposal would not just keep skilled workers in the United States. It would also connect relatives to their families. The number of green cards available for foreign employees is typically 140,000, while there are usually roughly 226,000 visas available for relatives hoping to join families in the United States. In recent years, as the Trump administration invoked various travel bans from Africa and Muslim-majority countries and suspended immigration processing during the pandemic, the United States failed to issue many of the visas. The result, says Representative Zoe Lofgren, Democrat of California, is harm to both American families and businesses. The backlog for family and employment-based visas has grown steadily in recent years from about 8.7 million petitions in 2018 to more than 9 million in 2021. Extremely well-educated individuals are now being poached by our economic competitors, Ms. Lofgren said. For Daisha M. Tanaka, who came to the United States with his parents in 2004, both the proposal to address the legal immigration system and the plan to establish protections for those living in fear of deportation would be crucial. His Filipino mother and Japanese father, who balanced jobs in carpentry and elder care while in the United States, went back to the Philippines in 2016 after 12 years of waiting for their green cards to get approved. The understanding there was they go home to their countries and have some sense of health care, said Mr. Tanaka, a 24-year-old graduate of Harvard. They don't have to fear deportation, and I thought I would get to see them by traveling. Mr. Tanaka, meanwhile, received protection from deportation and the ability to work legally through the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA, which President Barack Obama set up in 2012. If Mr. Tanaka left the country, he would risk losing those protections. He has not seen his parents since they returned to the Philippines. The provisions previously rejected by the parliamentarian would provide him stability, while the legal immigration proposal would improve his parents' chances of obtaining a permanent place in the United States. A senior Democratic aide familiar with the parliamentarian's thinking cautioned that she had not greenlit any provisions for inclusion in the reconciliation package. That includes visa recapture provisions that Republicans embraced when they controlled the Senate in 2005, but have grown resistant to in the current political climate. That year, Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, praised recapturing unused visas for high-skilled workers in a reconciliation package as a way to keep jobs here in America rather than export them to places like India and China. But an aide to Mr. Cornyn said the senator would support a standalone policy bill but would not support such a provision as part of the reconciliation package, which contains many other provisions he opposes. Dr. Singh said his frustration lies with leaders across the political spectrum who had failed for years to enact lasting changes to the immigration system. He grew especially concerned about keeping his family in the United States as he began treating patients for the coronavirus, realizing that if he got sick or lost his job, they would most likely lose the protection that hinges on his work visa. He recently received an email from one of his former patients asking if he would return to the clinic soon. Unless I see something that gives me stability, he said, he wrote back, I don't think I'll ever come back. So that's, that shows you a bit of just how far down we've come in the immigration debate, if we can call it that. That what was once a standard Republican proposal that they were trying to put through is now like, oh no, I don't think we can do that. I mean, it's ridiculous how far off track we've gotten, and how it's because of the pushing of a few really, really loud people that it's happened that way. It's really frustrating. Okay, here's something else. Entitled, Democrats' Updated Spending Bill Includes Watered-Down Immigration Reform. This is about the same topic here, and this is from a different perspective. The Biden administration unveiled an updated framework of its budget reconciliation bill on Thursday, with $100 billion earmarked for immigration reform. The $1.75 trillion spending plan includes watered-down immigration provisions after Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough struck down Democrats' last two proposals to provide a pathway to citizenship for millions of immigrants. Democrats are now gearing up to present a Plan C to McDonough in coming weeks. The legislative package proposes moving up the eligibility date of the Immigration Registry, a 1929 immigration provision that allows certain undocumented people already in the United States to receive green cards. The last time Congress updated the policy was in 1986, so the eligibility date doesn't apply to most people living in the country today. Democrats propose moving the eligibility date up to 2010, allowing those who entered the country illegally between January 1, 1972 and December 31, 2009 to qualify for lawful permanent residence. The bill also proposes recapturing family and employment green cards that went unused under yearly immigration caps from 1992 to 2021. Recapture provisions could provide relief to an estimated 4 million people waiting for family-based green cards and about 1 million stuck in the employment-based list, according to a think tank, the Wisconsin Center. I'm not familiar with them, the Wisconsin Center. It also includes a provision that would allow foreigners to pay additional fees to skip the green card queue, helping curb the backlog. I don't like that one. I don't like selling citizenship, but, whatever it takes. Green card waste is a decades-old issue in the U.S., and it's time to fix it once and for all, said Boundless CEO Zhao Wang. It is more than fair that the millions of visas that were approved by Congress but went unused because of government inefficiencies be available to people who've been waiting decades to receive them. So this brings up the other point, is the registry date, which makes a lot of sense because it was 1986 was the last time they changed it. So yeah, there's probably a few old people like, I've been here since 1922, that are eligible, but there's not a lot of anybody else because they're all dead. Anyway, moving on. So this is interesting. This is another change being proposed here. New guidance bars immigration enforcement in protected areas. It's long past time for this. The Biden administration on Wednesday designated the nation's schools and hospitals, as well as a wide array of other locations, off limits to immigration enforcement. The latest sign that it is committed to protecting millions of undocumented residents from deportation while efforts to offer them a path to legalization remain stalled in Congress. The new guidelines, effective immediately, list protected areas where immigration agents are to refrain from making arrests, conducting searches, serving subpoenas, or carrying out other enforcement actions. The sites include schools and university campuses, hospitals, clinics, and other medical facilities, in addition to COVID-19 testing and vaccination sites, places of worship, and sites where children gather, such as playgrounds, daycare centers, and foster care facilities. The new list is significantly longer and more specific than the one put in place during the Obama administration in 2011, which barred enforcement actions at schools and churches. President Trump largely ignored that policy, often leading to indiscriminate arrests. Quote, individuals should not be restrained or limited in their access to essential services, says Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, in an interview on Wednesday before the official announcement. Children should not be afraid to go to school. Their parents should not be scared to drop them off or pick them up, he added. Other protected sites include shelters for victims of domestic violence and homeless people, drug and alcohol treatment facilities, food pantries, and sites offering help to those fleeing natural disasters. Immigration enforcement action is also to be avoided at or near funerals, parades, and demonstrations. The guidelines represent the third policy issued by the Biden administration in recent weeks with the goal of bringing greater humanity to immigration enforcement, Mr. Mayorkas said. They mark a profound shift in interior enforcement and are intended, he said, to improve the day-to-day lives of millions of undocumented immigrants. Most of the 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States have lived here for a decade or longer, often with U.S.-born children and deep ties to their communities. About 2/3 of undocumented adults participate in the workforce, according to the Pew Research Center. A memo detailing the policy, which applies to field agents for Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and Customs and Border Protection, said that agents must, to the fullest extent possible, refrain from enforcement actions in the types of locations on the list at all times. Any exceptions must be approved by agency headquarters, a memo said. The guidelines come as Democrats continue to struggle to add immigration provisions to a sprawling social safety net and climate bill. Possibilities include offering protected status without citizenship to some undocumented people, and allowing immigrants who have been in the country more than a decade to apply for permanent legal residence. Since taking office, President Biden has moved away from his predecessor's tough approach to illegal immigration. The new guidelines are the most recent in a series intended to soften interior enforcement away from the nation's border regions. This week, 2 House Republicans sent a letter to Mr. Mayorkas demanding answers about the changes in enforcement policies. Representative Andy Biggs of Arizona deemed the new approach an affront to the rule of law. Gosh, this guy is a real piece of trash. I'm sorry. The more you know about this one particular person here, Andy Biggs, the less you like him. Anyway, instead of preventing ICE from enforcing the law, the Biden administration should be empowering them to keep our country safe, he said in a statement. And there you go. This editorial aside, keep our country safe. From what? From people being here, going to work, going to church, taking their kids to school? I mean, it makes no sense at all. But this endless tying immigrants with crime, immigrants with pathologies of all different sorts, immigrants with disease is effective. It's working on a lot of people. They're like, oh, well, is it safe? How safe? What do you mean safe? Are the immigrants going around butchering people? Not really. Not very often. Very rarely. Not as much as people who were born here. Should we keep those people safe from themselves, or keep us safe from the people born here by, demanding that people who are citizens carry a sign on their head that says, I am a citizen, therefore I'm liable to be carrying a gun and shooting people randomly? I mean, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. It's pandering to the worst in people. And whoever voted for this guy should be ashamed of themselves. Honestly. I mean, okay. Sorry. It drives me crazy. Back to our story. Mr. Biden has kept in place some of the border policies introduced by Mr. Trump to staunch the influx of unauthorized migrants at the border. Still, border officials encountered a record 1.7 million migrants in the fiscal year that ended September 30th. During the Trump administration, many undocumented immigrants refrained from spending time outdoors with their children and limited outings to a minimum, typically to buy groceries and go to work, knowing that they could be apprehended even if they had not committed a crime. Mr. Trump rejected the prosecutorial discretion that former President Barack Obama had exercised in enforcing immigration, instead making everyone who was in the country unlawfully vulnerable to deportation. Mr. Mayorkas, who has presided over the new enforcement strategy, issued the first set of new interior priorities last month, directing agents at Immigration and Customs Enforcement to target for removal from the country only migrants who had recently crossed the border or people who posed a threat to public safety. Last week, Mr. Mayorkas announced the suspension of worksite raids that can result in the arrest and eventual deportation of thousands of undocumented workers. The mass roundups, often at food processing plants, were a staple of immigration enforcement during the Trump administration. We must take a look at the population unlawfully in the country and recognize their significant contribution and presence for many years, said Mr. Mayorkas, adding that the administration needs to adopt policies that protect undocumented immigrants since Congress has failed thus far to grant them legal status. But while the latest steps are likely to win praise from immigrant advocates, it is unclear whether rank-and-file ICE officers, many of whom favored the crackdown imposed by the former administration, will comply. ICE and CBP have openly and brazenly defied guidance in the past, said Chris Newman, the legal director of the National Day Laborer Organizing Network, which has led a fight against local police collaborating with immigration authorities. In addition to outlining and expanding sensitive locations, the Secretary should take steps to rein in the rogue agents charged with implementing the new priorities, he said. Mr. Mayorkas said that the implementation would be achieved through training, management, and supervision of the agents. The Biden administration has drawn sharp criticism from immigrant advocates who are frustrated that he has not made progress toward fulfilling his campaign promise. Sorry, my longtime listeners of the show will recognize that my mouth just stops working after a while. Slow down. The Biden administration has drawn sharp criticism from immigrant advocates who are frustrated that he has not made progress toward fulfilling his campaign promise to offer a permanent legal solution to undocumented immigrants during his first year in office. Immigrants and their allies have been holding demonstrations across the country, from Washington to Los Angeles, in recent weeks to pressure Democrats to include a path to citizenship in the social safety net and climate bill. Protesters blocked traffic last Thursday on San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge during morning rush hour, demanding that Senate Democrats take immediate action to protect all immigrant families, according to a statement from organizers. Well, I feel that they should too, but at the same time, they're up against big odds. What I wish, okay, I only have a couple of minutes left here, so I'll have to do this quickly, but what I wish is that people who protested things would protest against the individuals that were responsible for the holdups. Not just generally say, oh, the Democrats have failed us. Biden has failed us. No, he's tried. They have tried. They have failed because there are not enough people to make it happen. We don't have enough of them. We don't have enough of them with the right attitude, with the right feeling, desire, the urge, the need to do this. It's just figure out who's at fault. Like, you want expanded child care credits? Then blame Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, because those are the two that are keeping it from happening. Everybody else is on board and wants it. Everyone else is pushing for it, is trying for it. So it's things like that. Just pick out, actually spend some time listening to politicians talk. Read about the negotiations. Figure out who's doing what and when, and then protest against those individuals. Don't just blame everybody, because it's not everybody that's doing it. Anyway, I've run out of time. Thank you for listening. This has been CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I hope you will tune in next time, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.